Everybody ready for a wonderful, exciting trip? My name is Larry Brilliant, and this is billed as a .org event. It isn't our conventional dogood.org event. So I have to just tell you why we got involved in this, is that David and I are friends who have a vigorous ongoing email correspondence about politics and the state of the world. It's usually pretty depressing. You wouldn't want to get on it. But I know David from writing the most intelligent, coherent, and long emails in all of human history. And I'm just so thrilled that he's going to be here and expose his other side of his life. So with no further ado, I'm going to introduce a long-time fan of his, Tom Galloway, who's going to introduce David and Sheldon.
Thank you, Larry. This is also an Authors at Google event, and it is being videotaped for eventual outside distribution, so we do ask that you keep your questions general and not very specific to Google. In other words, it's going public, guys. I've actually also known David for a while. To do the full introduction, unfortunately, Sheldon's going to be somewhat on the short side here because I don't know him.
After the talk, you'll
Fair enough.
much more.
Sheldon Brown is the director of the Center of Research and Computing and the Arts at the University of California, San Diego, and he is head of the New Media Arts for the California Institute of Telecommunications and Information Technologies. And his widely displayed artworks run cutting-edge technological innovation with renowned artistry, or at least that's what David has to say about them.
Thank you, David.
Welcome, Sheldon.
David, of course, is renowned as a science fiction author, having won multiple Hugos and Nebulas. He's also going to be the guest of honor, the writer guest of honor at next year's World Science Fiction Convention in Japan, which is a very great honor in the science fiction world. He's also known for writing about many other subjects, such as his book, The Transparent Society, about privacy. He's also active in education. This talk is going to be on visualization tools for creativity in the third millennium. And as Larry sort of indicated, one thing about David is his enthusiasm. When I first met David, I had just moved to California, and David, upon learning this, made me swear to tell no one outside of California anything good about the state to keep anyone else from moving in, and made me seal the oath by singing 3 choruses of California Uber Alles by the Dead Kennedys. I'm sure this will be an equally interesting talk. Ladies and gentlemen, David Brin and Sheldon Brown.
Okay, well, you know, I won my wife with one of my Castro-length speeches, and that was very nice, but we're under a bit of a gun here, and we're going to try to cover a very wide range of topics that all deal with the basic notion of can visualization and collaboration tools make a difference in problem solving, because problem solving is really what it's all about. Either we solve the problems of the next 50 years, or we're toast. Either the planet will be fried, or we will sink back into the standard human culture, which was shaped like a pyramid with a few lording it over masses of peasants below. We're the world's first human civilization shaped like a diamond, in which the well-off and educated outnumber the poor. And the implicit notion of the diamond is that it keeps rising as well, and that it's churning, and the children of the poor don't automatically inherit their parents' position. There's constant dynamism. Dynamism is what Google is all about. This is the goal of the Enlightenment, and can we solve the problems that are always looming to, try to prevent the Enlightenment from continuing? Now, if I find that we're running out of time, I will simply reset the clock, okay? So let's get started. And I'm going to operate my own slides. Okay, great. All right, so Sheldon was the lead man yesterday when we visited Will Wright because they had more in common. I'm going to be doing the majority of the blather here, although art is certainly an important part of this. You'll see that we quote Eric Schmidt at the bottom, that democratizing access to human knowledge has made us more powerful as individuals. That is the intention. Now here's a brief view of me. The Transparent Society is my nonfiction book. It's the only Addison Wesley public policy book from the 90s that's still in print, because it's all about will technology force us to choose between freedom and privacy, and it just won't go away. My novel Earth, they now have a wiki online that keeping track of predictions from 1990 that have come true. These are some of Sheldon's installations. You'll see this one at the Seattle Center for the Arts. He's just installed one in Vienna. And this is our Exorarium, which if there's time, we'll tell you all about it. It's an attempt to take computer gaming and make it into an extremely educational, well-targeted educational museum setting that takes visitors or online visitors through every step of creating humanity, and thereby covering physics, astronomy, biology, everything in nice little capsules. Okay, now, what we're talking about is progress in visualization, and I want you to pay your attention right down here at the bottom to lenses, which led to telescopes and microscopes, the discovery of perspective, and the printing press. These were three things that, of course, real life is more complicated than this, so I'm not going to claim that this is an absolute. Everything we do goes back to the metaphor of the blind man and the elephant. The blind man is grabbing the tail, oh, the elephant is like a rope. Grabs the tusk, oh, it's like a spear. And very often people try to grab the wrong parts of the elephant and they get kicked into next week. My job is not to be right. Will Wright's job is to be right. My job, some of you, your job is to be right. My job is, and Sheldon's job, is to step back, be interesting, and shake up your view of the elephant. So I'm offering you metaphors that aren't necessarily completely perfect telling us of what happened, but they help you to get an idea of the war that we're fighting. Every phase in the Enlightenment saw three things. An advance that augmented, a prosthetic device that would augment human memory, one that augmented human vision, and one that augmented or shifted human attention. Printing augmented human memory fantastically. It multiplied by many times the amount of knowledge that people had available to them. Glass lenses augmented vision, obviously, even to the extent of just being able to see. Perspective shook people up and said, we never thought of this before, and all the other things that they had that the Romans did not have, like gunpowder and sailing ships, none of them made them think that they were finally had caught up with the Romans. But perspective did. Perspective, the arrival of perspective made them think, the Romans never thought of this in their art. We must be better in some way. So it shook them up, but it also created a crisis of confidence. And so every time you had this triple of augmented memory, vision, and attention, it resulted in a crisis of confidence in which civilization, conservative members of civilization tried to say, reject this, we must, people can't deal with this. And always, two things happened. We did not use the new tools, and we solved the problem by using them to empower everybody. Now, one of the things that's going on that Sheldon is going to talk to you about is how modeling techniques fit into all this. Both scientific visualization and games require modeling techniques that are better at creating worlds, modeling objective reality or creating new subjective realities. And so the focus, you might think that we would focus on vision, memory, and attention, because I emphasize those. But we're instead going to step back, look at the elephant a slightly different way, and talk about how art, anticipation, resilience, and discourse are four ways in which these new visualization techniques can help us to become better problem solvers. So now to dash through art is Sheldon. Yeah, that's where we're at right now.
So we're actually going to use art as a framing mechanism for this conversation, kind of initiating these four areas with a bit of a dive into discussing what the role of art might be at this moment, and then come back to it after we go through these other areas of anticipation, resiliency, and discourse, if we have time. So, so first, in order to do that, we need to at least have some things that we kind of put out there as assertions about what art is and what its function and role is. Now, one of the main things that artists do is kind of endlessly pose that question to themselves. So art is often about trying to understand what art is. So you try to boil it down into a few kind of bullet points. It's quite difficult, but I think I can stand behind these. That what we're trying to do with art is highlighting the human condition of the moment, addressing the universal through the particular, and expressing our assumptions, but then shaking those assumptions up that spur cultural and social growth that burst out of old paradigms. So I'm not necessarily talking about culture in general. I'm talking about a particular area of culture, which is art. So as we move forward, how are we going to understand what is the shape of art and what is its role going to be in articulating the culture of the 21st century? Art is something that persuades without argument, expresses this tension between the individual and society. So we both have to look at the ways in which art functions in terms of making meaning, and then how it functions socially and culturally. So if I recognize that when I look at the 21st century, one thing that I note is that it's not just an extension of the 20th century. There are some things that are really radically different. And the one primary conditional difference that I'm going to state is that culture is now a Moore's Law condition. That went backwards in the slides. So now the forms of culture are all under the influence of Moore's Law. Their basic underlying modalities, their facilities, radically transform every 18 months as computing power grows. And so it's very easy to recognize how that changes the facility for art and cultural production. But what it actually does that's more profound is it changes the way in which these forms create meaning, the way they interact with culture and society. So can we start to reframe how we actually think art and culture make meaning? And so I look at this idea of visualization that comes out of the field of scientific visualization as a rubric for how future media, cultural, and artistic forms operate. And again, I would say this is a very different way in which cultural forms operated up to this point. And so some of the key things about it is that these experiences are driven by the user. So they aren't just simply received, but the user is a key element in creating the cultural forms. The data is heterogeneous. It's coming from all sorts of sources simultaneously, whether it's algorithms, archives, optical sources, other things, and it's mixed in real time. You get events and cultural forms. They're not arbitrary, but they're not singular privileged endpoints for that cultural experience. So to make these cultural forms, it's data plus algorithms plus the user. So the digital space now is this meta-medium for all of our cultural forms. But the other key difference to all of this is that these cultural forms are now a social space. And this is a radical departure from previous cultural forms. So now we gain cultural and social literacy through these visualization mediums. And the first one that we're really kind of fully articulating is the one of computer gaming. So another key difference of this is that our cultural forms are multimodal. So the same types of technologies, the same types of ways in which meaning created erupts fairly readily into multiple types of modalities, whether they're architectural, whether they're online experiences, whether they're sculptural, whether they're imagistic. The same sets of data and algorithm are output into these multiple forms all the time. So previously, we gained coherency by eviscerating a kind of particular modality of experience, whether it's spatial experience, textual experience, image experience. We developed the vocabularies out of that kind of visceral engagement that the body would have with that particular medium. Now we start to engage these syntactical structures across these modes. by looking at the kind of commonalities of expression that easily kind of move across them. So a project that I've been doing that highlights this is this project, Scalable City. And at the end of the talk, we'll hopefully see a little bit more of this, and if not, I can share it with you in other ways. But it's a way of looking at how can we express how this changes our relationship to how we see and understand the world around us. So this is an artistic engagement of data that comes in from various real-world sources, and then is reframed through different types of algorithmic structures. Results in different prints, installations, videos, 4K digital cinema, and a video game experience. And the underlying interest in it is to look at the urban condition as sets of inputs and outputs. So the urban condition is I/O. So it's not just media that is kind of undergoing this transformation, but it's the way we live, it's the way we interact and engage with the world itself. We are constantly providing data into algorithmic structures and receiving the output of those algorithmic engagements as our experience of the world. So in this project, I take these data streams and create these kind of fantastic re-articulations of them, where the algorithmic artifacts are highly articulated. I'm really looking at, exposing the algorithm in the final form. And it works with, as you readily saw, things like satellite imagery. But I also do this with automatic computer vision techniques for photogrammetry. So all the kind of cultural forms in there are automatically extracted from these photogrammetric techniques that are then tagged with metadata that is kind of automatically derived as the asset is taken out of the image source. And then that forms its behavior within the system itself. So you get so I'm exaggerating this relationship between data, algorithm, and user. And as I said, at the end of this, we'll see some more fully fledged examples of this. And that'll take us to resiliency.
Yeah, it's. I hope we'll have time and people will stay to watch the video of the Scalable City. It's this wonderful thing, the tornado of automobiles going through a landscape, leaving behind house shapes that fall into shape. Yesterday, Will Wright's fiancée said that it was like the proteins in a cell bouncing against each other and then pseudo-randomly forming successful houses or blowing up because they failed. It's a lovely thing, and I hope we won't run out of time. And I guess that onus is on me. All right, now I want to speak about the latest organ that we developed during our evolution, and that's the prefrontal lobes. The prefrontal lobes are right here above the eye. As a matter of fact, I believe that the Bible referred to them when they spoke of Moses having lamps on his brow. Now, nobody knew what to make of this. Well, lamps on Moses' brow, so they mistranslated it. A very similar word to lamp was horn. And all through the Middle Ages, Moses was depicted with horns on his head. The greatest sculpture ever made, Michelangelo's Moses, in a small church in Rome. If you ever visit Rome, you must see it. It looks like it's about to stand up. He has horns on his head. Okay, but these were actually the lamps on the brow. Why are they the lamps on the brow? They're what enable us to actually think about the future. They're the biggest difference between us and other grammar-using animals like chimps and parrots and dolphins. They're what enable us to do what Einstein called the Gedanken experiment, a thought experiment. He said half of relativity was the math, but the other half was just imagining himself on a tram going the speed of light away from the Brin clock tower. And the proof of this is that people who've had prefrontal lobotomies lose their ability to actually project themselves into the future, to say, what would happen if I spread this rumor by the water cooler tomorrow? What would happen if I told my boss he had bad breath? Only people over 50 have a clue what I'm referring to. What would happen if I tried to get through this yellow light? And losing this ability to ponder mental experiments of the future is why I would much rather have a free bottle in front of me than a prefrontal lobotomy. But The point is, thank you. The point is that this is what we use in anticipation. Anticipation takes up at least, by my estimate, 10% of our economy today. We think that the days of auguries and disemboweling the sheep to look at their entrails and tea leaves and all that stuff is over. It ain't true. Over 10% of our economy is given to writing business cases and prediction and stock market and all the other things that are involved in betting on the future, and we need to get better on that. I have a lot of opinions about that and a lot of proposals about that, but I'm going to actually skip right through anticipation because anticipation is actually getting a lot of attention. So is art. Art to shake us up. These two areas are getting a lot of attention. This is a slide from one of the defense briefings I've been in. Once a month I go to Washington. Most recently the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. I was supposed to sit in a room with people and do evil genius, what could go wrong next scenarios. And we decided that even though it was unclassified, to classify ourselves because we were coming up with too many nasty things. One guy said the worst thing the terrorists could do is get one of us to blackmail the rest of us to go do our thing. In any event, the point is, in business, government life, we seek to anticipate. And this is one of the slides I give at these things, saying, what is it that we're trying to defend? The only thing on this list that is shared by other cultures is nostalgia or patriotism for the tribe that we're brought up in. All these other traits are exceptional traits, unusual traits, Google-like traits, Enlightenment traits. And if we fail to defend this civilization that has these weird Enlightenment traits, I assure you the new powers in a pyramidal social structure will make sure that it's not tried again for another 2,000 years, just like they managed to prevent it after Pericles' experiment. All right, so I talk about the four accountability arenas, markets, justice, science, and the details of what they have in common, how they have managed to harness human creativity using anticipatory tools, and that's just not important to us today. We have three levels of civilization, the traditional hierarchical levels that are supposed to use anticipation to protect us, and utterly failed to do so on 9/11. And that doesn't mean they were bad. The lesson is anticipation inevitably does fail. You have the accountability arenas, which are more agile, more inefficient, but they probe in all directions for things that might be profitable or might be scientific. And then you have the people, flighty, chaotic, undependable, but the ultimate source of resiliency, accountability, and sovereignty. Now, this defense slide spoke about how there are four types of information flows going to these three levels, and it creates a matrix in which we have to use matrices like this to see if there is a part of this set that is being underutilized. Certainly, for instance, these guys are trying their best to seek information about them. They're already skilled professionals doing that. But are there ways in which through this, using a matrix like this, you can try to find underutilized opportunities? But I'm going to just whip right through anticipation, because anticipation is not the topic today. Anticipation inevitably fails, as we saw in 9/11 and we saw again on Katrina. And what we absolutely rely upon when anticipation inevitably fails is the partner of anticipation, resiliency. Having a robust civilization that's capable of rolling with the punches. In many of these defense gatherings, the premise is, how can we deal with public panic? And several of us almost always say, what panic? Show me the panic on 9/11. You saw people running away. You saw some people crying. But there's not one known case of a New Yorker running away from something that needed to be done. The moment they saw something that needed to be done, they turned away from their panic and their crying, and they did it. It was a case of the citizens of a great American city basically standing on the rubble and saying, what else you got? And this power is something that is not being paid attention to by the big meetings at the top of the hierarchy because they psychologically do not want to notice it. The point is that the great trend across the 20th century, the monotonic trend across the 20th century, with the ups and downs of fascism, the ups and downs of the moon race, the ups and downs of everything, the great trend across the 20th century was the professionalization of everything. At the beginning of the 20th century, you did almost everything for yourself and your family. By the end of the 20th century, I have strawberries flown to me in wintertime from New Zealand by professional pilots. I do. So does Sergey. I don't know my pilots. Perhaps he knows his. The point is, all I have to do is pay twice summer rates and I get strawberries. The specialization thing has been great. The professionalization thing has been great. It's wonderful. We owe almost everything to it, and it cannot continue. Simple demographics. We're going to run out of people who are qualified to become professionals. Duh! The point is there's a counter trend that is ready. It's the counter trend that you are feeding. Your business is to feed this counter trend, although certainly professionals use Google. But the rising levels of citizen education and access to knowledge, there you go, overlapping and intermeshing specialized fields. An airline pilot can be a very, very good local paramedic. Hey, you see, he's been a scoutmaster for 3 years, okay? He could be in CERT, he could be something else as well. The explosion of hobbies and skilled avocations, and again, augmentations of vision, memory, attention. We're entering into an era of omnivalence, omni-knowledge through the knowledge mesh that you are creating, and attention, immersion intention. These things have to result in an age of amateurs, or we're screwed. It doesn't have to denigrate the professionals or the specialists. Each professional and specialist can be an amateur at a dozen other things, and what does that lead to? That leads to robustness. That leads to resiliency. But it is resisted. It is resisted tooth and nail. The one thing we saw at Katrina, everybody's talking about FEMA and all that, and I agree, I hope for a change. Fine. But the politics is aside from all of this. Republican, Democrat, state, local, federal officials, the one absolute common trait exhibited by the professional protective cast on Katrina. Absolutely, whenever they saw citizens trying to do something the way New Yorkers did on 9/11, it was to say stop. They had reasons. They had liability concerns, they had law concerns, they had all these concerns and rationalizations, some of them racist. The point is that when you see something that's universal, you have to take a look and see if something deeper is happening. And it was absolutely universal protection of guild privileges in response to what they had seen happen in 9/11. And it's very, very dangerous, because the robustness and the resiliency is exactly what we rely upon the most. I mean, I find it staggering that people who claim that we're acting in our own defense, who complained that under Bill Clinton, the military was only ready to react quickly to one major and one medium-sized surprise attack. We are now capable of reacting to one small surprise attack. If Mexico invaded right now, we would be in dire straits. Our ability to respond resiliently to shock should have been upped, one would think. Now, here's some things that we've talked about. They're great. They're important issues. How the cell system could be revised so it would work better in an emergency. How the internet, there was internet in Katrina and no cell. There should have been peer-to-peer cell capabilities. These people all had sophisticated radios in their pocket that did not work. That's ridiculous. But the internet, there was abysmal self-organizing software, the abysmal ability to simply organize themselves. Here's another example of self-organization. How many of you saw my hand grenade I threw in Salon magazine a few weeks ago about why Janet can't code? I have never received such bilious rage from political arguments, things that I deliberately tweaked out there in order to, any other human civilization would have burned me at the stake long ago, so I keep trying. But this, I swear, the programmers out there, wow, man, the anger I got from people who obviously didn't read the article, because what I'm talking about is the fact that my son brings home from class these textbooks that have chapter review, they have the problem set, and then they have try it in basic. Little thing that illustrates the statistics or whatever the chapter was about. Type it into your computer and see, watch the algorithm actually cause the coins to flip or cause the dot to move across the page, powered only by Galileo's laws. Wow, I remember doing that. Do you? Not if you're under 25, because it doesn't exist. The computers on our children's desktops cannot compute. Oh, sure, you can dig, you can download, you can all the letters said, oh, you can do this. None of the people who have this in their textbooks, none of the kids who have this in their textbooks can. They can't, and they don't. And you know what? 3 different Microsoft executives have told me when I complained about this. 3, almost exactly the same words. There are still basic programs in textbooks. Don't worry, they'll go away. All right, I'm going to race past this, but I recommend you go to e-sheep.com/spiders, and it will instantly show you the point that I'm trying to make about empowering people. If you have a robust civilization of resilient and confident amateurs, they will be able to augment our civilization's resiliency. But in order to do that, they desperately need tools of discourse. So, this is the main thing I wanted to talk about today. Enough with anticipation, enough with resiliency, discourse. The real digital divide here is between the asynchronous realm and the synchronous realm. The asynchronous realm, the content provider and recipient are not there at the same time. This is the realm that adults use. Web browsing, email, file sharing, downloads, search. Did I say that right? Research, project collaboration, weblogs. It's very useful to grown-ups, though the interface here still needs vast improvement. I'm not being nice to you people on this side there. The synchronous realm, chat, instant messaging, interactive gaming, virtual worlds, avataring, telepresence, content provider and recipient are present at the same time. Primitive interfaces that dumb down the exchanges to the level of flirting, grunts, and shooting. Except for meetingware. And Groove made a good effort. Groove missed a lot of what was necessary, but made a good effort. Except for meetingware, this realm is almost useless to serious people, almost useless to adults. Now, you know, this is the synchronous realm today. Chat. In 1969, I sat at a teletype at Caltech and did this. My initials and a colon followed by part of what I typed, followed by somebody else's initials, a colon, and part of what they typed, interrupting me in an upward scrolling melange. All right, great, you can add stuff like that. Millions of kids have MySpace. This generation is writing more words, reading more words. They have higher IQs than we ever had. If they are not engaging in discourse, it is because they are held in contempt by the creators of this site, who believe contemptuously that they don't want to engage in discourse, that they want buxom avatars, head balloons that can fit at most a clipped sentence and ROFL. Well, that is all they can do. And what we have is what are called honeypot ideas. The honeypot of Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. Let's build buildings and have avatars. And you know what? That's building the furniture first. It's not building the functionality that enables them to actually convey ideas to each other, test ideas against each other, produce evidence, analyze, act like sapient descendants of people who built this civilization. And yes, 98% of them aren't interested in that, but 2% is an awful lot of creative people you could hire. Excuse me, I should try to get more passionate. Now look, our abilities at discourse go back a long way. You wouldn't be as good at what you do at a cocktail party. You wouldn't be that good at talking to people if this didn't go back a long way. Our ancestors, I believe, knew where the migratory paths of the animals were. They would send boys ahead to the traditional places where they always knew they would catch a beast and traps and all that. And they would gather wood ahead of time and crush grapes into gourds and leave them hanging from the tree to ferment. And in a few weeks, naturally, they caught another animal and they invited the Ugruk tribe over for a barbecue. And they took the gourds off the trees and so, how's it been? Yeah, right. I am sure they held business meetings, caroused, and berated each other. The point is, we wouldn't be as good at these things if it weren't evolved into us. Our brains are capable. Our attention economy is not new. Our ancestors provided practiced selective focus by adjusting their distance from somebody, turning to and away from others, heeding their reputations, favoring things that are interesting, remembering what's important to them. Rules of courtesy, keeping a train of thought, staying alert for surprise. Discourse depends on attention, selective focus, prioritization, and countless mental skills that we take for granted. And we still do all of these things. We keep track of the gist of a conversation. Time has effects since the person mentioned something, and yet it doesn't lobotomize us. We adjust attention with time, orientation, reputation. And yet, if you're at a cocktail party, if you're at a restaurant, and somebody 3 conversations away from you mentions your name, or any of a dozen other hot-button words, what happens? Out of the buzz that you've been ignoring, whoop, your name suddenly leaps out. Or the name of somebody you care about, somebody you once dated 20 years ago. And what's more, the previous sentence that led up to them mentioning it leaps out. Now, what does that mean? That means your brain is constantly hearing more than you're hearing, and it's constantly providing services that enable you to That wasn't supposed to happen yet. The special effects, you're fired. I think we're probably okay, but why don't you, sir? Why don't you simply move someplace else?
I'm going to be good now. Everybody's going to ask questions.
One more, just to make me happy. Yeah. Staying ready and attuned to surprise. Learn your cues. Being able to respond well to surprise, as if you're back in that jungle. These are things that our brain empowers us with all the time. And the thing is, the internet should be providing analogs to these services so that we can engage in discourse. And that includes gisting and semantic services. Government and academia have lots, you guys have lots of knowledge, text, analytical services. But the problem is that it's very hard to get them into the online world in a way that mimics the smooth way that we use them in real life. Now let's step back for a second and talk about this. What would be our wish list for services that would boost online discourse? In life, we assign scant attention by priority. You've heard of the attention economy. Some of the traits that affect priority are orientation, facing toward or away from people, proximity, you're approaching, avoiding them, time since they last spoke, reputation, and topic, syntax, things that are contained within what they're saying. Ideally, these should, online, affect things like the size of the speech text display, rendering of avatars, video, gisting of the contents, fonts, sifting high-impact words, semantic services like alerts, smart transcripting, omni search, and the availability of information and actions that you could do on the spot based upon the prioritization that you've given to what's going on. Now, I'm going to show you examples from this wish list, things that I really wish were out there. One thing is, almost none of these places actually separate text ability simply into windows where you can track them. This does have some precedent. It does exist in a few places. And certainly you could claim that the separate avatars with separate speech balloons might qualify for that. But here's an example of the effect of orientation. What? Oh, I don't know why that happened, but you see, by shifting the attention from Joe to Mary, the emphasis on size of available discourse space changes. Now, mind you, all of this could happen in 3D. It can happen in video. I'm talking about the prioritization effects. I'm not talking about some simplistic online demo that shows a window of text. Although having this would be a vast improvement in discourse over anything that's out there. Here's the effect of distance. Oh, shoot, I'm going backwards. There's some sort of bounce going on. All right. Here's distance. All right. So, gets larger as it approaches. There's also timestamp. If this person hasn't spoken in a while or a long time, their window gets smaller. This person spoke recently. That has an effect upon their window. And of course, there may be a complex, algorithmically based interaction of these prioritization factors. So if this person hasn't spoken a long time but has a very high reputation and you're facing them, they stay larger than, say, for instance, this person was away and behind, even though they spoke just recently. And I spoke of reputation. There are two kinds of reputation. The one without a slider, the blue thing, represents global reputation. The hosted system, by its own standards and its own modalities, the hosted system has given this person a very high reputation. However, it's only medium high in the slider effect of reputation that is applied by the individual user. This person here has a high slider for a personal score of this user, but a low global rep. Therefore, because of that, even though this person is slightly closer to this person has a larger effect, a larger window in this case, but there are many ways of representing a larger affect of the person. Now, here's an interesting thing. You have the scrolling effect. You're saying the most recent words, and then it scrolls off the top. What could be more useful than a simple slider along the side so you could slide back up and see what the person said before? What would better replicate your own mind than saying, what was that you were saying earlier? And we can't do that. Find me a place online where you can. There are dozens of problems going on this screen. Let's see if there are some very, very simple ways to try to solve them. This person, people are all worried about the weather, and this person was saying something about his omelet. So the system reduced it to blah, blah, omelet. Here, this person's facing this way, so all that got removed is a few articles. Priority 10 words. But even so, the type font gets smaller toward the top so you can fit more gisting into. And so near the top, you would have more gisting going on until at the top, there's just high impact, high semantic value words. Look what happened over here. Here's the guy's name. He's been worried about his sister. These have highlighted off him, and they could even highlight on a global bird's eye view, acres away. There could be an alert. This topic is being discussed over here. Would you like to send a clone? Would you like to send an eavesdropper? Would you like to teleport over there or walk over there to see what's going on? Because we're alerting you that information that's of value to you, a topic that's of interest to you is going on over there. All sorts of gisting services that try to make some sense out of chaos. And there are lots of other services that this sort of thing could provide. Project whiteboarding, where you could asynchronously gather around a project and engage in action items. Groove approached this and seemed to miss the point. Smart transcripting, where you're in a community and you can draw a line around people to get level 1 transcripting. Some other hangers-on to do level 2 transcripting, just to keep track of the gist of what they're talking about. Courtesy cues. Kiosks do exist. Kiosks exist on there and Second Life. They are mostly places where you go to buy things, which is, of course, a good thing. And they should be part of, they're not making anywhere near enough of kiosks. Basically, you go into them in order to get your avatar body augmented. Now, some of you may be saying, of course some of this has been done before. It's obvious. I heard that from the Computer Human Interface Conference. I heard that at the MIT Media Lab. People said, of course, and I kept saying, where's the prior art? Show me where it's been done. It's needed. We need stuff like this in order to replicate some of the services that our own brains provide so that people can engage in useful discourse. There are lots of others: video, analytic tools, self-cloning, teleportation, new style game methods, environments, rapidly augmented reality overlays. Augmented reality that's supposed to be going on our goggles and eyeglasses in 10 years, showing you the read Werner Vinge's science fiction and my science, and I've applied one to Tara that's supposed to be downloadable for you guys in Google. It's a work in progress, and it shows augmented reality being used to organize smart mobs in the next 10, 20 years. I gave a copy here to Google, and Werner Vinge's new book, Rainbow's End. Both attempts to convey the way the world will be in 20 years with instant access to augmented reality overlays of all kinds, just at the tap of a subvocal command, and suddenly there are dinosaurs everywhere, or anything you want. You want a map to the here or there. All these augmented reality overlays, you don't need to wait for the goggles. There are ways to do it now. Now, how do I know that these things have never made it online? Except for a few things like the kiosks and the size of avatars with distance. What, never? No, never. Here's your proof that these traits, properties, services, and methods have never made it online. No significant prior art. These gaps in online discourse are real. And the patent will issue now. What a coincidence. I arranged it. My patent issues today. Which means that if you're online right now, it may or may not, depending on my Eastern Standard Time, this number may or may not be up. You may have to use the application number. But proximity, orientation, memory aging, importance, reputation, filtering, spatial content. Am I really out to make a lot of money on this, or to use this thing to draw attention? Because I haven't, in recent years, been able to get people to admit that this hasn't been done. Media Lab, Computer Human Interface, they all assumed, what are you talking about, Brin? Of course all those things have been done. They have not been done. Well, there's a crude demo. A crude demo that I could show you in which crude, you can do the reputation slider, you can do a crude form of exchanging files and getting people's personal information. You can see a certain small amount of gisting going on, text services having to do with, it's just a little cheap, garage style. But there are some implementations that show the variety, because what would be ideal is to offer this as a set of host capabilities, and then let hosts be creative and compete with each other to create worlds. Here the angle of orientation is a face. Here it is a video image face. Aim in one way, these get larger. Aim in another way, they get smaller. Control panels for controlling the various services of living in this world, where the services are more important than the buxom avatar and more important than ROFL, although you can physically type ROFL. Various specialty worlds, Horoscope World. This is a group in Las Vegas was working on a 3D avatar-rich prototype. DARPA was going to give us a contract to develop citizen action networks. Then the TIA, Total Information, we've had great luck. Total Information thing hit, and their entire information budget got zeroed out. And if we had this contract, it would have been ready in time for Katrina. So, to summarize our meandering path, tech advances in vision, memory, and attention disrupt civilization, provoking crises of confidence. This has been going on since the 15th century. Civilization passed every test by refusing the retro-nostalgic efforts to quash these new powers, saying that they would make us sinful, saying that they would make us crazy, and instead used them to apply reciprocal accountability, which is the theme of my nonfiction book, The Transparent Society, and of my novel, Earth. The notion that we grow up and can apply accountability reciprocally across all civilization. And in order to do that, we need a minimum of secrecy. But above all, developing all of these prosthetics for vision, memory, and attention into new tools for problem solving. And in this talk, Sheldon and I talked about art, which shakes up the assumptions in the status quo. And the 21st century tools for that include visualization, simulation, games, generalized openness, where people can define art however they wish. Anticipation, leaders foresee dangers and opportunities. 21st century tools would be analytics, modeling and correlation, data gathering, accountability. These are all happening. We need them to happen more. We need Sheldon out there, with more students doing more great art. But at least there's substantial attention being paid to this, especially art as applies to gaming. Yes, there's great stuff. Wait till you see what Will Wright's going to spring on you. But the other two, resiliency and discourse, they desperately need augmentation of the tools for visualization that can lead to problem solving. In resiliency, the citizens are robust. They respond well to surprise. 21st century tools that are needed are agile communication, self-organizational skills, dispersed expertise, transparency, and above all, confidence. In discourse, this interoperates well with resiliency. We argue, we discuss, we persuade, we react quickly, we improve, and we need better interface with which to do these things, with which to argue, with which to come to conclusions. And that brings us to the end of the formal part of this talk. But I do urge you to, during the Q&A, I don't believe it. We did it under an hour. Dang, your ears must hurt.
Show the video.
All right, well, we can show that wonderful video of Sheldon's, and you'll find it way cool, and what's more is it'll give you a chance to do your bathroom break, and then we'll be open for questions. Is that what you'd like?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Hey, they're interested in you, not me.
So there's a couple of things that I would show from this, but what I would start with this project, in somewhat similar way as David's talking about discourse, you know, we as we start to create these tools of these digital tools, you know, we start with some kind of representation of the world around us, some way in which it simply translates to the medium, to the screen. But then we have to actually step back and reflect upon what it is we're actually doing. You know, how can we actually really kind of capture what the essence of this thing is? And I think, as David's showing with Holocene, you know, really to try and, you know, investigate what is actually happening in conversation and how do you turn it into something more meaningful. And so part of what I'm doing in the Scalable City is, you know, trying to look at ways in which what the effect is upon when we have this kind of ubiquitous Google Earth view of ourselves, when we have this way in which we kind of are creating these worlds that we're simultaneously occupying between the virtual and the digital, and then trying to come up with a kind of provocative interplay of those two. So first thing I'll show you can we have the audio? A video that takes you through some of the process of creating the Scalable City. And it starts by taking data, such as this, which could come from Google Earth. But then taking that, and that just becomes a seed to create a new kind of a way of replaying that environment. So I take a height map of it, then I apply an algorithmic transformation to it that's fairly large in its gestures. It's meant to kind of leave behind the traces that, yes, this is a kind of algorithmic gesture you've done here. You've cut, copied, pasted, and rotated a piece of the world. Something we're really familiar with in the plasticity of digital media. Now we start to apply that same algorithm to something that's a little more analogous to the real world, and it becomes a little more of a provocation of what the meaning of that transformation is. So then those little colored lines are actually analyzing that and looking at spaces where you could possibly start to grow a city. In this case, then I use an L system algorithm to actually, which is developed for plant growth simulation, and grow a network of roads into this landscape. And these roads are built from these Archimedes spirals, so these highly decorative patterns that have been used throughout cultures for thousands of years, almost globally, to decorate surfaces. And so in some way, it's kind of replaying that image for the view of the satellite. So the satellite view becomes the kind of privileged, desirous view of this environment. So these roads grow into this landscape in a kind of automatic way. I have no real control over it besides adjusting the parameters of the landscape, or I mean of the algorithm. And then these become the underlying setting for which the city is actually going to start to arise based on the user interactions. And for that, I have to boot out of here and boot up the computer game part of this. So this provides a kind of cinematic overview of one of these underlying data processes for this. And what I think I will do is boot out of here and tweak a couple of settings. I'll show you this little in part here. So in the interactive environment, what you're actually operating, you exist in this space, but not in that kind of singular, kind of normal avatar mode. You actually control something that's a little more akin to a weather system. You control a particle system that consists of all these automobiles. So you're having a kind of affect upon the environment without kind of like a singular one-to-one interaction with it. So you control one of these particle systems as it kind of stirs up the environment and the environment grows around you. So the end result is your engagement within that world shows how it kind of you both kind of are in a process that's constructive and destructive with the world around you, and that, you know, some form of maybe some underlying mathematics of what culture actually is, and we hope to have a little bit of a little bit of the constructive left over after the destructive.
I guess let's open this up for questions. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, a lot of what you've spoken about here and then also written about on your blog, talking about, I guess, some of the failures of anticipation as well as action by our government and elites in general. What is your thought or hope on the possibility that there is some accountability soon?
Well, accountability is the fundamental thing that everybody, we have to understand human nature. Human nature is informed by the fact that we had got a lot of bad habits for 1 million years, other bad habits for 20,000 years, and some very bad habits for 4,000 years. During these pyramidal cultures, every time human beings got metallurgy and agriculture, large guys picked up metal implements and took other men's women and wheat. And then they hired a bunch of guys in spangled cloaks to leap around and get the dregs from their table by saying, it's good that he has your daughters. It's good, it's good. Here's the reasons. It is the most natural thing in the world. That's why feudalism has such a good grip on our imagination. That's why fantasy is more popular than science fiction, including fantasies like Star Wars, as he plugs his latest book. Star Wars on Trial. The point is that the Enlightenment is one major attempt to redo the effort that Pericles made in 530 BC. And that is, and Plato and his ilk made sure that it wasn't tried again for another 2,000 years. For 200 to 300 years, we've been trying something completely different. And that is to use a rule-based systems of markets, science, and courts, and democracy to harness human competitiveness. And the only way these 4 accountabilities arenas work is if they're open, if they're reciprocally accountable. If there's darkness, if there's shadows inside markets, cheating will happen, duh! And the markets are no longer efficient. If there's darkness in democracy, cheating happens, and it's not efficient at correcting policy. Same thing in science, same thing in courts. So it is absolutely essential. And I tell these defense guys, I have nothing against tactical secrecy. Our side does have to win. But anybody who acts as if what they're keeping secret is going to stay secret in 5 years, with the way technology changes, is a fool. Or they want a closed society that will be able to keep secrets in 5 years. And if we aren't on an openness and accountability trend within 5 years, then we are screwed. I can't make it any plainer. I mean, this is not political one way or the other. I mean, this is just pretty bloody obvious. And you folks are part of the openness trend. That doesn't mean I'm opposed to all intellectual property right. That doesn't mean that I'm going to wag my finger at you about China. The Enlightenment has to win its victories as it can pragmatically. But the overall secular trend has got to be towards a more open, accountable, resilient, and citizen-empowered civilization, even if you have momentary deviances from the path. Does that answer your question?
Pretty much.
Well, that's me in rant mode. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm not sure how exactly to ask it, but you'll get the gist of it, which is, do you really expect that showing people I've got a patent now is going to make them say, oh yeah, that shows it hasn't been done before? Because I mean, if anything, the patent system's shown it sucks at finding hierarchical software.
Fine, fine. How about 10 years of daring people? I dare you. It's as simple as that. I dared a smart ass like you at the computer human about several dozen. That was no compliment. At the computer human, I had 800 smart asses in front of me at the Computer Human Interface Conference at the MIT Media Lab. By all means. But the same thing is, you see, your response is very interesting. It's very much like the 3 executives at different executives at Microsoft saying, "Oh, there's still basic programs in the textbooks. Don't worry, they'll go away." I mean, this is the amazing thing. It's kind of like only Steve Jobs understood what the GUI meant when he toured Xerox PARC, and nobody else saw what they were seeing? I remember in the mid-1980s, HyperCard. HyperCard comes out, and the universal response was, oh, that's cute, but why would anybody want to click on a hot spot on a screen and cause another screen to appear? I don't get it. We have these honeypot drawing attractor states, and we have things that just repel vision. People don't look until you have a Mark Andreessen. You know, you have a Tim Berners-Lee who says, hello, I saw HyperCard and I refused. Instead of saying, I'll bet it's been done before. Who cares? All that's going to affect is how much money I make off of this. The fact is, it's not being implemented. It's not happening. And that's what I care about. And if getting the freaking patent is going to help me show some people, it is not happening. The entire general suite of ways of doing things online is not happening. I'm not talking about the implementation of this or this. I tried that for years. I said, here's our Holocene implementation. And they say, well, it's not as sexy as Second Life. You can get avatars off the shelf. You can't get this off the shelf because it's never been. I don't know what to do. Quite frankly, if the patent doesn't get people to say, I guess it's never been done, I guess it's been underdone.
Yeah. I'm going to guess your problem is at Chi and MIT Media Lab. I mean, I've seen papers that do things like this, but somebody wrote a paper, or somebody made an implementation, and after that in academia, well, you can't do that again.
If there's a paper on this or a paper on that, then it cuts down the range of my patent. It is an insanely aggressive patent. Absolutely insane, because I thought, WTF? You know? I'll draw attention to the whole field by, now, as it turns out, in the process of drawing the patent office did find two little things. It is, I don't own all proximity and orientation in all implementations and all results. Due diligence, I will perfectly be happy to point you in those directions. And if you find some more, we will add that to due diligence. And if, as a result of you guys going out there and finding all sorts of previous examples and deciding to implement them, you leave me with nothing, then Google will start providing all this wonderful things, and at least you'll give me a pat on the head for having sparked you. Will you do that? Because that's all Mark Andreessen has. That's all Tim Berners-Lee has. Pat on the head, and I hope you'll give that. I hope you'll give that to us, you know, for having come here and sparked you to get down and do this stuff, or find somebody down the road who will do this stuff. That's, you know, half the satisfaction would come from that.
Although I will have to say that to separate a little bit. In my case, I hope that, you know, I've showed my project, Scalable City, to different people, and I did a show in Warsaw last year with it, and it was attended. The presentation was attended by all these government ministers and urban planners who were thrilled with it, and I'm very fearful the next time I flew into Warsaw. He's going to be surrounded by these horrible suburbs of curly roads.
He did not mention this time that he's thought that you did last time, but you need to make it part of your regular shtick. That half of what you're doing isn't this cool, and half of what you're doing is a cautionary tale.
Yeah,
because I mean, it creeps you out watching this thing.
So it's both the compelling vision that this stuff offers, but you know the foreboding as well.
And that's what art is supposed to do, as we said. Any other questions before we do a quick dip back into art? Then let's do it. Yeah.
Do you ever wonder if the reason why no one does that is because it's just not available?
Oh, well, it could be. However, one would think that it would have been tried. I believe that there are more than enough examples in this new world we're entering where there are honeypot attractor states and blind spot distractions states, that the hypothesis that this is one. Now, are you telling me that a working hypothesis is that people do not want methods to orient their attention better online according to prioritization factors that mimic the prioritization factors of real life?
I'm saying the demo you gave there, to me, looks terrible. I wouldn't want to use that interface. Now, there may be
And did anybody else hear me say that this was a schematic to demonstrate the effects of orientation, not a way, not a service that I was offering as a finished product? Did anybody hear me say that?
Wonderful, but I don't think the ideas in there are terribly useful. They may turn out to be. But if you want people to implement that by taking the patent, you've just killed most of the field. I mean, people will shy away from it because it's patented now.
All I can say is I tried the other approach. That may be your reaction. I'll bet you there are other people in the room who see that the existence of the patent is evidence that this is an under-investigated area.
Well, people could try to buy it.
What?
I said, well, people could try to buy it. I mean, a patent doesn't necessarily kill the field because people can offer to buy it.
I mean, is it possible that maybe the patent means that I can be a guy who says, I want this to be a generalized thing that goes out to a myriad hosts? There are people in this world I would not sell the patent to because they would then either use it to kill these things or to create a single shrink-wrapped box. And what I would like to see happen out of this is a generalized suite of host-empowered methodologies to allow a million different people to compete with each other on hosting services by providing different mixes and matches of the effects of reputation, the effects of proximity, orientation, the effects of text gisting services. I have to tell you that if you consider text gisting services to be something that unimpresses you, then I actually have to tell you eye to eye, I don't think you understand. I just don't think you have a grasp of what you just saw. Because how could you in this room, in this company, not believe that offering text analysis services that then alter the effective delivery of text and speech and other information, I mean, at a different level, looked at from a different side, it's what you do. So I don't mean to be, well, you came out after me.
So you started out, you had synchronous and asynchronous.
Yeah.
And the asynchronous is the adult stuff, that's what we do.
Yes.
And then you've got the synchronous stuff, and then your demo's based on that. And I think maybe the question is, why should we be interested in that? Why not apply some of these techniques to the asynchronous side?
I never said that they don't apply to the asynchronous side. I think that, as I said on this asynchronous slide, it needs improvement. Many of these gisting services could easily apply to asynchronous. Many of the tools that enable us to work offline mentally. What I'm asking for is a step back and say, what is it that we do? We're very smart. Are there some things that we do that did not make it online? During the hypertext thing, we look, we point, we tap, and we want new pages. Duh. This analogy from real life was suggested for the online world, and it took 5 years for somebody to say, here's the web. More than 5 years. All I'm saying is, let's take a look at what our brains do. And I'm sure I've missed several. And if you come away from here with nothing else than, let's step back, what am I doing right now when I'm at a cocktail party? What am I doing right now when I'm being at my most creative? What am I doing right now when some piece of art is shaking me up? You guys are the ones who are supposed to be doing that. Stepping back now and then and groping up the elephant. Be careful. Yeah.
Take the optimistic approach. Since a lot of the earlier part of your presentation was sort of showing about how these changes in human approaches to information interaction continually iterated over the centuries. Do you see what you're proposing here today as inevitable? And
yeah, as inevitable as the GUI, as inevitable as hypercard. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean,
What does that mean? Were those necessarily inevitable? Was the lens inevitable, and why at that particular moment?
The lens is a great example, Sheldon, because lenses did exist in Roman times, and they did not cause the disruption. They did not cause the shake-up in vision. Printing was crudely available. They could have carved a page of a book and created many, many copies. The pyramidal social structure and the assumptions that were embedded therein. Hero of Alexandria had steam mechanisms, not just the spinning thing, but steam-driven pistons that would move stage productions. It's the deeper set of assumptions that are part of the Enlightenment that enable you to take these augmentations and make them shaking up disruption, terrifying things that are given to everybody.
So what I usually say when I talk about these epical shifts is it's this confluence of technological, cultural, and social transformations. You know, these techniques, these augmentations that are available that may have been sitting out there for centuries, for decades, for weeks, but they coincide, they provoke these other ways of, these other kind of idea fields. And so you both kind of allow a way of articulating, of seeing this world around you, and this new kind of powerful mechanism for interacting with it. And so that, for instance, in the 15th century is the key to the Renaissance, how it spurred the transformation of the ecclesiastical by being able to show the world as opposed to just some sort of hierarchical representation. So we now became a part of that which was worthy to be represented. And in fact, these same mechanisms also allowed us to quickly engage in commerce across seas, in new forms of building, new forms of architecture. So they have these cumulative effects, and I think that's the key thing that we're trying to look at this particular moment. What are these kind of cumulative cross-cultural, cross-social effects? And where might there be seams in them? Where might there be gaps? And are there ways in we recognize these gap areas? Are there then approaches that we can take to kind of bridge them? And those bridges become the necessary means by actually, getting us out of this whatever predicament we're in and getting us into the next cultural and social phase.
Yeah, I was stunned when I realized that the people of those days, they didn't consider their sailing ships or their cannon to make them better than the Romans. They had been living in an inferiority complex with Rome for so long that they were simply assuming they had some additional toys, they had some additional this. It wasn't even printing. It was perspective. That so rocked the intelligentsia of Europe and said, Romans never had this. They never had it at all. We have moved ahead. And from that moment on, bang, they stopped referring to Roman law. They stopped referring to Rome as, well, the classicists did, but it wasn't a bang. But you see what I'm getting at? The task before us every now and then is to step back and say, what tools are we missing? What things are we missing? What ideas are we missing? Because we don't have time. The enemies of this Enlightenment realize that in the next 20 to 30 years, we are either going to make it or blow up the world or fall back into old-time human patterns. And they believe that the way to avoid calamity is to go back to pyramidal control, and they may be right. They may be right. But I'm not gambling on that, and neither is anybody else in this room. I'm gambling on the notion that we can take the Enlightenment to its point where we have sustainable technologies, where we have problem-solving tools that are so agile, so resilient, so good at anticipation, so good at rethinking in rapid real time, that we can deal with the problems quicker than they come up. Because that's what the original slide was. It's problem-solving tools and looking for gaps in those problem-solving tools. And I'll tell you where the biggest gap is, in my opinion, right now. It's in helping the people to be self-organizing, robust, smart mobby, resilient citizens. We talk about it. You guys have been providing them with the one portion of their tool set that actually works. They can get online and they can get into the knowledge mesh and they can find stuff. I'm yelling at the one room full of people who are actually doing something about this. Sorry, you're the only ones I can yell at, except for the defense guys, and all they want is anticipation, anticipation, anticipation. I point out to them that the all-volunteer army, ironically, is the first army in all of American history that doesn't know what to do with volunteers. Always in the past, there was a professional army, and their job was to be a tripwire, knowing that as soon as war started, millions of young men and women would stand in line to avenge them. And that was our pattern. I asked a general the other day, and I said, what would you do with 1 million volunteers? He blinked at me. He said, I wouldn't know what to do with 10,000. And he was rocked back because he hadn't realized that the shift had gone so far away from our American traditions that he was conceptually incapable of even noticing that it had happened. And that's what we're here for. Do you want to see the, oh yeah?
One quick question. You said anticipation inevitably effects. Is Google a result of anticipation, or is it, in what percentage is it a success of anticipation or resilience? Or when Google started, there was no business model, there was no plan, they just did something they love to do. And it's not really a question, just some. What do you think?
What you're talking about is many different levels. There's Google's business model. Did that result from anticipation? Did anybody expect? I honestly don't know. I can tell you, though, that what Google provides a pre-conscious for our civilization. And the pre-conscious sifts amid a myriad things and tosses up a selection of them for our consciousness to then push aside another 99%. Until we say, I'm going to ponder this. The exact analogy, because I've been making a lot of them, the analogy for the human mind is what's called the preconscious. Google does that. Google's job is not to be engaged in the process of anticipation, to provide anticipatory analytical tools. Now, you may go into that as a side business. You may go into that, fine. But right now, the service you're providing the world is the pre-conscious. What we don't have is a civilization filled with citizens who have analytical tools and the ability to discourse with each other, winnowing and fine-tuning and creating coalescing smart mobs on the spot. We do not have that. Would you guys like to see the video? Okay.
And that's how we're going to conclude, everyone.
Right.
Yeah, this will just start. So this is.
And we thank you.
This project results in multiple forms at all times. This is part of a installation of this at a museum in Austria called Ars Electronica, which is probably one of the coolest museums in the world. And I thought that before they had one of my pieces in there. So, but it's a 4-screen installation, and this is one of the screens that people interact with. It's loading right now still. And the other screens are machinima. So take the same database and kind of, I don't know if you know what machinima is, but it automatically generates cinema. So in this environment, so I'm controlling this particle system, this tornado of cars. And as I move into the environment, it's scattered with all these photogrammatically derived architectural fragments that have these, they do have behavior embedded in them. But I have these physical forces. I'm a tornado after all. And I'm doing multiple things. So as I move through the environment, the road system grows around my location and kind of gives me places that I can move or not move. I exert forces on the masses of these objects. Their masses are kind of derived by their size and shape. But also, as I'm doing it, I'm kind of sorting the environment. So behind me, you can see these houses, if they land in particular lot areas, they start to self-assemble themselves into houses. They try and go back to their kind of original state.
Very much like proteins randomly jogging against each other inside a cell.
Yeah, so it's a form of there's a form of a genetic algorithm that operates as you move deeper and deeper down the roads. And it's a little bit hard to navigate on this tiny little podium spot I got here, but and this is a multi-user environment, so there are other users that you would see as their kind of vortices moving through this space. Now the next iteration of this is to engage users in the actual seeding of the databases of this. So right now all the data of this I've gone out and grabbed myself. But what I want to be able to do is have as I do these things in museums, I want to have a station where people actually select the part of the earth they want to put through this pipeline. That they actually you could actually get people to take, is the process of extracting these objects. These objects are really funky. They're not perfect, photochromatic extractions of the 3D geometry. They're filled with artifice. And one of the things I often say about art is what you do as an artist is you choreograph artifacts. And that's certainly what this project is doing. But I want people to be able to actually take their own photos and upload them into this system. So their own data becomes a part of this environment. And then the last step is that this becomes right now I have a multi-user environment for museums, but I want to be able to have it as an online module. But of course you have a lot more complexity around the graphic environment you're putting this thing into. I got myself out onto a road where I'm not generating any new curves in the middle, so let me try and quickly scoot around here. My mouse interface, let's do that. I have trees growing in the middle of the road there, that's too bad.
There are parallels, of course, between this and our Explorarium, which is an attempt to do what, how many of you have heard of Spore? Well, that's why Will Wright had us up yesterday. We spent 3 or 4 hours with him. He was trying to find out how far we've gotten on Spore. I mean, on Explorarium. And I guess he was probably pretty relieved to find out that we're a bunch of penny-waste little, academics who haven't really taken it very far at all. So he took us out to lunch. But the Explorarium takes a different approach than his approach. But this is also people generated by choices, user choice, user desire. It's what Sheldon is very interested in at many levels.
And that all of our, so like, this is a kind of choreography of systems. So you have, IK, genetic algorithms, physics, L systems. So I have data that is in this rich algorithmic system-based environment. And the end result is the articulation of how all those systems interact and coincide. And so that's, another kind of, when I talk to people like Will Wright, what we're really looking at is how these future cultural forms now increasingly depend upon smarter and smarter computational environments. that the way to just kind of like blindly assemble data, which is how computer games got made or other types of database environments, that accomplished a lot. But as we move forward, we end up getting these orders of magnitude of data environments that we have to continually interact with. And the types of things we want to do have higher and higher levels of aspiration. And so what we continually need is better and better computational tools to make these things happen. Now fortunately, this thing called Moore's Law keeps going along. And we keep soaking up every kind of last bit of it as we go.
As we soak up every last bit of landscape. So there's a chilling aspect which is also intentional here, because as you can tell by looking at Sheldon, he's not exactly a
Careful.
developer.